Welcome to Innovative Outreach, the podcast where the sacred meets the cutting edge. I'm your host, Bryce Baldwin, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you into the intersection of Jesus, community, and innovation. In a world that's constantly evolving, it's essential for church leaders to stay ahead of the curve, and that's precisely what we're here to explore. Each episode will dive into conversations that empower church leaders with the tools and insights needed to transform their communities into thriving, impactful spaces. In the 21st century, the landscape of outreach is ever-changing, and it's time for the church to be at the forefront of innovation. Join us as we uncover fresh perspectives, share success stories, and navigate the challenges of reaching the community in a postmodern culture. But we're not just here to talk. We're here to inspire action. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And hey, if you're passionate about making a difference and want to share your experiences with our community, check out the link in the description below to become a guest on the show. If you want to keep the conversation going, join our online Facebook community, link below. Together, let's equip ourselves with the knowledge and inspiration to make our communities a better place to live, one innovative outreach at a time. Welcome to the intersection of church, community, and innovation. Welcome to Innovative Outreach, where today we are talking with Arnie Buehler, lead pastor of Bowling Green Alliance. So thank you, Arnie, for being on the first ever episode of Innovative Outreach.
Thanks for having me. I feel honored to be on the first one ever.
Yeah, so you better live up to this to make it go viral on the first one.
Set the standard.
Today we're going to be talking about community centers and community dinners. And we're going to kind of go backward in some time of Arnie's history and talk about community centers. And one of the biggest ways that Arnie's been able to have outreach and reach the community is through a community center. So tell us about that. What was that community center like, and what did you do with that community center?
Sure. So the community center was over in Binghamton, New York, and it was in an inner city community. So a community that was suffering from generational poverty, a lot of violence in the community, a lot of gentrification happening and taking place. So there was a lot of people that were kind of displaced, discouraged, just felt neglected by the community at large in general. And so it left a lot of just a lot of poor situations for families to try to kind of break that cycle of poverty. And so when we launched that center, what we did was first we started with prayer walking. And so we went down with our leadership team and people from the church because our church was actually in a different community about 8 miles away, probably sitting in a more affluent community. And then we were, trying to launch this initiative, this community center outreach in the poorest community in the region. So that had some challenges in itself. But so we started prayer walking, and as we did, we're just asking God, what would you like us to do? How could we, utilize this building that we were given basically to run the center? And what we noticed was that there was just kids everywhere running around the streets. Parents were absent. Like kids as young as 10 years old were responsible for their little brother or sister that was, a toddler, just walking around. And there's nothing in this community to do. There was no Boys and Girls Club. There was no, there was a YMCA, but it was kind of like on the outskirts of the town. It was difficult to get to. And so there was the school district was up on the mountain, way up in the community. So there was nothing for these kids to do. So we decided that we would first launch the center and try to reach into the children, the youth, and give them a safe place to be. And then slowly from there, reach adults and take that ministry further.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. So I know you kind of talked about the prayer walking and you kind of seeing the need that took place. Tell us how did you actually come to finding a building and starting a community center. I know we talked about it offline, but just kind of share that story, then we'll get more into what it actually looked like.
Yeah, and that was a God thing. So, we were, as a church leadership team, kind of just praying and asking God for a unique opportunity to do some outreach. And we didn't really know what that answer was, or what he would call us to, but I think we were willing to open our hearts and just be obedient into whatever call he gave to us. And so it just so happened that a kind of a sister church in our denomination, the pastor was retiring, and his church was very small, and they didn't change fast enough to react to how the community changed around them.
Mm,
And so they were basically a dying church that, once the pastor retired, that was no longer going to exist. But
mm,
the building was in such a prime spot that, just around the corner from the church, there was a Muslim Islamic center that wanted to actually purchase the building for their use. And the pastor was like, "Do you guys want this building?" And so me and the lead pastor and our elders at the time were like, you don't have any idea. We've been asking God for an opportunity to do something unique like this, and so I think this is it. And so it didn't take long for us to say yes to taking on that building. And then once we started doing the prayer walking, that's when we decided that, yeah, community center over a church model is
mm.
probably the best way to reach the community first. And then we can maybe move into, having a church there again in the future.
Yeah, that's really awesome how that all worked out. And tell us more about, like, what did the center look like? What did, if someone was going to start one, like, how would that, what you did in your center, what things did you do to reach the kids around you?
Sure. So the building was a unique old building, that was used to be, had a long history of being a bar and a bowling alley. I even heard some reports that at one point that it was like an underground brothel. So it was definitely like a dark spot in the community for a long time, until the church kind of bought it and used it for God's glory. So we were happy to kind of continue that legacy that church started there. Um, but So the building had kind of that unique fit to make it into a community center already. It wasn't designed to be a church.
Mm,
So we had areas where we could put in a makeshift basketball court. Um, you know, Certainly the two bowling lanes down in the basement that the church saved were unique. Because many of the kids in the poor community, they never went bowling before.
yeah, that's awesome.
And so it lent itself well to what we wanted to do instead of the church model. But how we started was, we just kind of had the idea that we were going to launch a free summer camp, because there was no opportunities for kids to do anything that was free, especially in the summertime. And so we just started by going around the community saying, "Hey, we're new. We're passing out flyers for our free summer camp. We'd love to have you join us." And it was received really well, actually. People were like, "Oh, that's great. I'd love to send my kids down. There's nothing for them to, attend here and do." So that first year, um, we saw, I'm trying to think of how many kids we had, probably close to 60 kids that
Mm,
first year for our summer camp come and join us for. There wasn't a whole lot of, I would say, intentional religious component to it. It was just more so, "Hey, we're a safe place to be. We
right.
want to love on you. We want to get to know you." My wife and I just kind of created a bunch of activities for kids to do each day. So every day had a different theme, to it. And then we split up the teams into like the red team, or the group, into two different teams, a red team and a blue team. And then we had challenges all week where they competed against one another. We did crafts, we did messy water games out in the parking lot, um, just had dance parties, just random things that very high energy, get the kids, uh, starting to get used to coming to the building and getting to know us, of course. And then from there, we asked God, okay, what's the next step? Now that we know these 60 different families, these kids, what do you want us to do? So again, we thought that launching an after-school program in that very next fall was the best route, and so that's what we did. We started an after-school program that would provide some food, some snacks for kids after school, and then homework help, but then also a place for them to come, yeah, you play basketball, yeah, play games, and we kind of slowly built it from there to what it became. Um, so I'm probably the most unique thing that happened with that was I called the local school district when we launched the after school, tried to explain to them what we're going to do, that we would love to partner with them, and they didn't want to give me any time of day. I was like, let's be friends. I just want to help reach these kids, and they didn't like whatever, dude. Do your thing, uh, and so that first year we maybe only had about 10 to 20 kids coming to after school program, which was fine. It was a good way to learn how to control the space, and
Sure.
then also just get the components in, of what after school looks like each day. But then that next year after summer camp, we exploded, and then we saw about 100 kids coming out to our after school program.
Hmm.
Um, and so then, lo and behold, the school district calls me, and they're like, "Hey, we know that you have 100 of our students coming to your after school program. We should be friends." And I was like, "Yeah, I told you." And so that started like a beautiful relationship with the school district.
That's awesome.
And this is New York State,
Right.
which is, very difficult to kind of have that relationship with the school district, a religious relationship with the school district. And so, um, from there, it just kind of bloomed into a lot more ways that we could reach the community because the school district had our backs. They
Right.
were supporting us, and so we were open to a lot more opportunities and resources than we had before.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I really, as church leaders, we often kind of almost feel like this tension of like, well, it wasn't overly religious, but that's kind of the point of what this, innovative outreach is all about, is like a lot of people in our communities need to know that we're there for them outside of just, hey, come to my church on a Sunday morning, or I'm here for you as a person. I have something more to offer you, than just, coming to church for a couple hours a week. But our church has a lot more value. And think about, the story you just shared with the school district, like, your church, even though it wasn't functioning in what your normal Sunday morning building, it was still an extension of the church. The school district probably would have had no other reason why ever to partner with you, because you started this and added such value to the community, they were like, we have to do this. We have to partner with them. But did you see that happen at all? Did any barriers break down between people and how they viewed church or Jesus based on meeting them in this other location?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were going into a very dark area. There wasn't a whole lot of gospel presence in that community. There was a few, mainline churches, but they're more on the social justice side of things, and they weren't really, presenting anything that was, gospel oriented, or Jesus centered for that matter. And So in a lot of ways we started fresh, with the kids, kind of teaching them slowly, about what it means to follow Christ. And so even though the after school program didn't have a religious component to it, what we did was on Wednesday nights, we moved our youth group program down there.
Mm,
So then we started inviting the kids, actually, not only our youth group program, but also our weekly kids ministry program was down there too.
mm,
So on Wednesday nights was kind of our youth group church night, where we invited those same kids that were coming after school, and the best we could, it was wild, it was crazy. The best we could is we would start to disciple these kids, talk to them about who Jesus was, share the gospel with them, and slowly from there, that even provided, with a small number of students. I wouldn't say, most were there were just for the food and, play basketball. They're like, dude, get out of
sure.
my face. But a handful that first year, were curious. They wanted to know more. And kind of a funny story on that was, many people in my church, they were supported what we were doing, but not really involved. So there's often a lot of questions like, well, what is Arnie doing down there? Like, where's
Nothing.
the fruit? Like who's like, we want instant results, in America, all the time.
Right.
And so I said, okay, I hear you. So my wife and I were like, well, let's bring these kids to church. And so we got a bunch of our volunteers. We didn't have a church van or anything, but several of us picked up like 15 kids one Sunday morning and brought them to church. And these are kids that have never stepped a foot in the church before.
Hmm.
They didn't know the proper etiquette. They did nothing. So we bring them in, and it was just hilarious to watch because it totally disrupted the service. They're answering their phone, mid sermon. They're going to the bathroom every 5 seconds. They're spilling their hot chocolate on the floor. Like it was a mess from like just
Yeah.
a standard church person's perspective, but
Right.
I loved it.
Yeah.
And so from there, people were like, "Yeah, why don't you just okay? You're doing a good job. Just keep them down there, Josh."
Right. That's
So,
hilarious.
uh, that was neat. But we still brought them to church. We just helped people slowly understand that, yeah, this is what we're called to. These are fresh, in the sense of they're spiritual fresh. So they know nothing about Christianity, about church, and that's our job to teach them,
Yeah.
uh, and then give them the grace and the mercy when they don't look like a typical church attender on Sunday morning.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, really, it was slow at the start, but we did disciple more kids as the years went on.
It's awesome. No, it's great. And my kind of the way that God's been framing my idea of like this whole piece is like making our community a better place to live by adding value. So how do you think that community center in Johnson City added value or made that city a better place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in multiple different ways, even in a lot of ways that I didn't even anticipate, because we had such good relationships with a diverse group of people. The police department called me and wanted to come or send officers, once a week to our after school program, so that they could begin to break down the
Mm,
barriers of kind of that hate that's taught early on in a poor community of police officers. Um, and so they would come play basketball with the kids, and just kind of utilize my relationships that I had, to enhance their relationships. So that was really awesome. And the police department even like bought us a basketball hoop,
mm,
to help support, that ministry. Gave us donations of snacks and food, and so it was really great to see kind of those barriers break down
sure.
between some of those kids that again, they're trained to hate the police,
Right.
at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so that was really awesome. I think another way was the way the school district utilized our
Right.
building, because many of these parents, they didn't have transportation, and so they couldn't make it up to the school for parent teacher conferences, for school meetings, because literally you had to hike up a mountain to get there. So um, the the way that the school used our building was they hosted these meetings on site within our facility. And then I had a relationship with these parents, so they knew who I was. So I just invited them to come,
Mm-hmm.
and they attended.
Mm.
And so the school was able to increase their communication with a rough demographic that normally didn't care about anything the school was sending them or trying to tell them. And then we also started bringing in outside groups for these parents to learn
Mm.
how to create a budget, how to cook food on a budget, different ways that, or what we even had a class on the safety of social media for parents. One group came in and did like a whole they set up a fake bedroom and taught parents how to find drugs and how kids hide drugs.
Wow.
Uh, and that was a really neat kind of walkthrough experience,
Yeah.
that even, some of these moms and dads in the inner city, who you would think, they're smoking drugs with the kids, like it's,
Right.
but some of this stuff they didn't even know how to what kids were doing, like how to hide this drug paraphernalia in their
Right.
room. And so we did a lot of unique dynamic things. Another way, we partnered with a local college, Binghamton University,
Mm.
and that connection was through the school district as well. So but a woman that was in the school kind of running a program to help students. She was a social worker professor at the college, but then also worked in the school district. And she heard of what we were doing and wanted to partner with us instantly, because she was like, "Can I send my students down for volunteer hours that they're
Mm.
required to have for their
Great.
degree anyways, to your community center, to your after school program, so that they can learn what it's like to work with this demographic, because that's what they're going to be doing for the rest of their lives."
Right.
It's like, yeah, 100%. Like, we need more volunteers, and this is a great way to even impact college students with the gospel as
Sure.
well.
Yeah.
So that was a beautiful relationship, that they would send every semester new kids down to do a certain amount of hours. And some of those college students wanted to come back even though they finished their requirements.
Mm. Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
but that woman, the most unique thing about that woman, that the professor, was that she was a lesbian. But she so appreciated that me being a pastor was willing to live out what the Bible says.
Mm.
She was like, "You're the only pastor that I've ever come across that's actually living out what Scripture says, and what it, I mean, she clearly had some sort of religious background that
Sure.
she kind of was upset about, or
Yeah.
and obviously she knew where I stood, that I didn't. I loved her, but it didn't support her lifestyle. But we had a good relationship, and she was
Mm.
my number one supporter,
That's awesome. Yeah,
until the
that's
day.
really cool.
So
Yep.
that was neat, and she gave me opportunities to even speak to her classes. So I came in and did what was like a generational poverty training that I would give my volunteers, or even youth groups that would come in the summer to help us do their summer camps. So I would run them through this poverty training, because people in poverty don't think like middle class America at all, and so it's
Right.
just able to understand the different mindsets there, and not to judge, certain things that you might, come across dealing with that community. So the students love that, when I would kind of bring them through that training. Um, so yeah, it was amazing the way that God opened different doors in that community,
Yeah.
in things that I didn't even dream of.
Right. Yep. No, I can see that. Yep. Always the layers that you never know are there. But what I really, love about the thing that you said is that ultimately, like, with the whole idea of like adding value, making it a better place, God loves the whole person. And so like you minister to people in a lot of different ways. Like that's what, budgets or cooking classes or just different things like that. Like you're ministering to the whole person. Where again, sometimes church can be just come down to our spiritual life or come in the door kind of a thing where you're ministering to the full person, which is really cool. And so as people listen to the community center, you can kind of hear through Arnie's steps of how they started it and what they did. So maybe that's an option for you as a church leader to consider, but maybe that's not as accessible. So let's pivot and talk about where you're at now in Bowling Green, doing something that we all do mostly every day, and that's eat, and that's putting together some dinners. So talk to us about what did that look like in your context now?
Yeah, sure. So when I moved to Ohio in Bowling Green, it's a much different community than like the inner city, um, generational poverty demographic. So when I first got here, naturally as a pastor transitioning to a new area is just kind of asking God, okay, what do people need? How can we reach our neighbors around us? And this is a very affluent community. Not that we don't have the poorer group here, but for the most part, it's a college town, um, and uh, and it's expensive to live here. So like if you live here, you're making some decent amount of money, and so you don't really need anything, I guess.
Right. Right.
Is my point here. So I'm asking God, what do we need? And then coincidentally, I moved here right before COVID, and because my house was in that poorer region of New York, we weren't able to sell our house right away because everyone was kind of leaving New York, and no one wanted to live in the inner city, basically. So we couldn't sell our house, and then COVID hit, and then everything in New York shut down. Especially more so compared to the state of Ohio. So I'm here in Ohio without a house because we can't buy a new house until we can sell our old one. So thankfully, someone in my current church had a temporary house that we can move into. But and this is kind of what prompted me into my thinking of outreach here is that as my wife and I were kind of upset at God or angry that our house couldn't sell, we couldn't get settled here, and we really took for granted what we had in a home. And so we're walking around the neighborhood, that we were living in, and this idea just popped into my head. I guess maybe again you could call this another prayer walk that I was having with God, just kind of rustling through, like, what are you doing? Why don't I have a house? You called me here. But so as I'm walking through the neighborhood, and this is a nice middle class neighborhood in our community. Everyone has these amazing backyard setups. Like an amazing fire pit with awesome chairs and outdoor bars and pools. Just nice green spaces with gardens and things like that. But then I hardly saw anyone using them.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking to myself, I would not having a house right now, I would give anything to have a backyard, to have a fire pit, to have a great space to bring people over to, and just call my own. And so I started thinking, really, we already have all of this stuff. Why can't we make it our number one ministry resource to reach our neighbors and just invite them over?
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, it kind of progressed to, well, maybe you don't have a cool outdoor space, but you do have a dinner table.
Right.
And so I thought of this idea where I was like, okay, what people in my community need most is just, we don't need anything. We can't give them clothes. We can't give them food. We can't give them, stuff that I could give to people in the inner city. They just need community. And so I said, I challenged my church. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to set out to host in our homes 1,000 family dinners with people that we don't know, whether they're our neighbors, whether they're, even if it's someone in our church that you don't know, have them over for dinner, invite them into your space, and get to know one another. And so that was really cool because that took off really quickly. And so we set up, what we did in our lobby is that we set up kind of a shadow box, and then we had like these little wooden tokens that I called like dinner plates. And so every time that you had a family dinner, when you came to church the next time, you grabbed a token and you put it in this shadow box, and then we could watch the 1,000 meals kind of grow visually right there in the church lobby. And the kids really got behind it in the church. They loved when mom and dad had someone over for dinner, and then they could run to church the next time and go grab a dinner plate and put it in the box as just a way to participate with that. So that was really cool to see that kind of. I mean, we hit our goal. I mean, we started that in January of I think of 2022. We hit our goal by October.
Wow.
So people really got behind it. People really enjoyed it. It was just so easy and tangible to just use your dinner table as your number one ministry resource.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really neat.
And it created a lot of new relationships that people started coming to church, and they felt just kind of the warmth of family, and really the importance of. I mean, if you do some research on how important it is to have a family dinner together,
right?
There's a ton of research and statistics out there that claim that kids are far more well off if a family has consistent meal times together with one another. They do better in school. Their emotional health is stronger. They feel connected to the parents more. And so really this idea of having church family dinners, it made sense to do as well.
That's really cool. And I know you kind of talked about it, about the new relationships, and I mean, talk about the dynamic of like, did you see it affect and change how your church people thought about their neighbors and outreach?
Yeah, I think it helped. The biggest thing I believe that it helped my church understand was so often that we just wait for people to come to us. But the reality is that we are sent. So if we can start living as if we are sent, and God has already, especially in my community where it's just neighborhoods all over the place, God has already strategically placed people around you,
right?
Kind of that theology of presence, if you will. That those people are already there. He's already placed them there. You live there. You might as well get to know them. You might as well have them over.
Right.
Just engage in those conversations, because you never know where it might lead. And some people said, you know what, I've been living here for 5 to 10 years and I have never talked to my neighbor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just like blowing my mind, right? Like, how do you live somewhere and not talk to your neighbor across the street for 10 years? Like, and so it kind of helped break down that awkwardness, and just open doors of something simple as like, hey, do you want to come over and hang out in our backyard around the fire? Or, you want to have a dinner? We'd love to have you over. And again, not all those relationships came to church because
Totally.
but I think it did create a sense of better community with my church people with their neighbors.
Yeah. And obviously we know sometimes when it comes to that kind of thing too, we know how God works. Sometimes when I invite someone am I being faithful to God, or God might be working in my heart first before he works in my neighbor's heart. And hopefully down the road, that has opened doors. So if crisis opens up, or your neighbor gets into trouble, that they're going to call you first, or,
Sure.
so you just never know what those relationships will continue to, unfold. But do you think a church can make a community a better place to be just by having people over for dinner?
Oh, 100%. Again, I mean, I think it's, uh, especially I mean, maybe just in American in general, but especially in a college town.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of stigmas that people put on the church. And so um, I think it was a great way to kind of break down those barriers of what many people that are outside of the church community, just to say, like, yeah, my Christian neighbor is just an average dude.
Right.
Like he has his own problems. He works in this job. He's not this, whatever they think in their mind, that kind of that negativity that surrounds Christianity. And
Sure.
unfortunately, we bring that on ourselves a
Right.
lot. We shoot ourselves in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you can just be real, genuine, authentic with people around you, slowly people are interested in what you believe, and how you choose to live your life. I really like the verse from Ecclesiastes that says that God has put eternity in all
Right.
of our hearts.
Right.
And so really that's what they're searching for, right? Everyone
Totally.
has that eternity, that they don't quite understand, or they don't know why they have that drive in their soul to want to know more about, where they come from, how they were created. Is there a big God up there that made everything, that loves us, that is in charge, that's in control? And so everyone's asking those questions, whether they believe it or not, or they stuff it down. So yeah, I think if you can just teach people how to generally just be authentic with people, not necessarily come at them with a Bible track, throwing Jesus down the throat from day one, but slowly just love on them.
Right.
They'll open up to you, start sharing things. They'll even ask, hey, I know I'm not a Christian, but can you pray for me? I'm dealing with
Mm.
this difficult thing
Sure.
in my life. And so God will do the rest. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to try to save people
Right.
when we can't. But if we're just willing to live sent, and just trust God to do the rest, I think He'll do amazing things.
Yeah, it's great. I've appreciated this conversation that we've had, and just from the different perspective of different ways to reach the community, think about it differently. And just last question, if you could encourage just church leaders, how would you encourage them just to think differently about outreach, or in a sense to be innovative when it comes to outreach?
Yeah, I think again, it just goes back to those prayer walks that have been so beneficial to me, and no
Mm,
matter what setting I'm in,
sure.
is that God knows what that community needs more than you, right? From even before you get there. So why don't you just go to the source and just ask Him, what are you calling me into? What should we start? What should we create? What can we give to people that they need?
Mm,
Uh, and He'll give you those answers. And so I think when you're on the ground walking, you kind of really open up for the Holy Spirit to kind of show you exactly what those needs are. You just see the community in a different light. Um, and so when I moved here to Bowling Green, like I didn't know, I never lived in this community before. And so there's like different pockets, different places that have different feels to it. And so you just got to learn what those are,
right.
and you wouldn't see them if you stay in your church building
Yeah.
all week. um so yeah, I think just asking God what people need, but it doesn't have to be complicated, like I love Christmas, so another great way that I get to know my neighbors is I set up an insane amount of Christmas lights on my house.
You sure your neighbors don't hate you more, or
Oh,
they like
no,
it?
they love it.
All
They
right.
love it. Because they walk by and they ask, "How many you got now?" Or thank you for doing this. It's like, we really appreciate that you light up our neighborhood. And so, like, I have neighbors that walk by at least once a week just to see my progress.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk to me and, like, why do you do this? Well, I'm a pastor. I love Christmas.
Yeah,
Whatever. And so that's easy to do, right? That's a small
sure.
thing to do. Is just be outside where people are at, and not just go to work. And then when you get home, you stay in your house and you don't
Right. Hide
engage.
away. Yeah.
Um, or I'm a soccer coach at the local high school, so, like, get involved in the community. There's different ways that you can engage new people that what normally wouldn't interact with a Christian all
Totally.
week.
Yep.
And so, many of the players know that I'm a pastor, and so they're asking me questions like, "What do you do all week? What do you talk about?" Uh,
You wear robes.
yeah, 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 right. The silly questions, right? Um, but my church even organized for Pastor Appreciation. They brought the whole church to one of my soccer games, and so
Mm,
my church was like cheering me on, and all this stuff, and all the players like, "Who are all those people at our
yeah,
game?
that's
Why
awesome.
do they know you?"
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So it just opened up doors in that way. And one of our players he's a Muslim, and
Mm.
so I got to explain to him, like, yeah, it's Pastor Appreciation Month, and he's like, "Oh, that's really cool. That's really neat that they would do that and come support our game." So again, I think it's just this idea that we have to go to where the people are. We can't just stay in our four walls of the church building. Um, and and I came across this idea at a recent conference I went to, but I really loved it. But we need to live and do things with Jesus instead of for Jesus.
Right.
So that concept of, like, no matter where I go, what I'm doing, whether it's setting up Christmas lights, whether it's coaching soccer, whether it's I'm going to the office, how can I do this with Jesus? Because He's there with me to help me reach the world around me. So I think
Yeah, that's
that's
great.
another good mindset that I want. For next year, I want my church to. I think a theme that I'm going to have them live into is being set apart. How can we be set apart in 2024 in our community, that's different than the world, but even different than churches in the community? How can we just live
Mm.
that sanctified, set apart life that God calls us to, and shine His glory around us? So
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great. Good insight. Appreciate it. Definitely down the road, we're going to find a couple more guys who coach and pastor as well. We're going to definitely do another show about coaching sports and pastoring, and that'll fit obviously any believer, and just, great ways to just connect with people in the community in a way that's, not in the, not standing behind the pulpit, or in your case, wearing a 1600s wig behind the pulpit. But yeah, so thank you so much for your time and your insight. And I think if anybody's listening, wherever they're at, I think they have some key things to take away from, how do I take this, apply this? And one of the biggest things that stands out from me is how you were in two different contexts and you found ways to minister to that context in a way that just met people where they were at. And so again, that's innovative in and of itself, is saying, where are people, what do they need, how do I step into that? So that's a really great takeaway I had. So thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it. And thanks for being on.
thanks, Bryce. I really appreciate it. Glad to do this.
Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And hey, if you're passionate about making a difference and want to share your experiences with our community, check out the link in the description below to become a guest on the show. If you want to keep the conversation going, join our online Facebook community, link below. Together, let's equip ourselves with the knowledge and inspiration to make our communities a better place to live, one innovative outreach at a time.